Communities of color and older adults are being disproportionately impacted by this pandemic. AARP is addressing these inequities and pushing for the creation of legislation, as well as leaning on its partnerships with advocacy and civil rights organizations to accomplish its goals. Here to continue our conversation today is New York State Senator Kevin Parker and Arva Rice, who is the Executive Director of the New York Urban League. Thank you both for being with us this afternoon. Obviously, we're all in a place where most of us have never been before, dealing with this pandemic, and minorities and older Americans are getting hit the hardest. I'll start with you, Senator Parker, because I know that you really focused on legislation over the years, specifically targeted to older Americans, seniors. And where in this pandemic, I think you've got another piece of legislation that's in play right now. Talk to me about what that bill would do.
Well, Sandra, again, thanks a lot for having me on. As you know, I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn, which is Flatbush and East Flatbush, Midwood, Ditmas Park, Windsor Terrace, and Park Slope. And I actually represent the district with the largest number of senior citizens in any other Senate district in the entire state of New York. So dealing with the issues of senior citizens has been kind of at the forefront of what I've tried to attempt to do. Right now, from a legislative perspective, I'm actually looking at drafting a piece of legislation that would have the Department of Aging and the Department of Health, it's shortly combined to actually do an analysis of COVID and older Americans and particularly New Yorkers and trying to figure out kind of what happened. And I've actually already put in a bill that actually addresses that issue as it relates to Blacks and Latinx communities. I think it's really important that we have some very specific understandings. We have an office in the state of New York called the Office of Health Disparities that's nested within the Department of Health. And so I'm asking them to do the study so that we can have more conversation about this. But what we do know already is that health disparities exist in our communities. We have, not only are we underdiagnosed and misdiagnosed more than any other community, but we also have more comorbidities and more people with compromised immune systems. You put on top of that we are the essential workers, we are the frontline workers in hospitals, and then once we get sick, we go back to the communities that are most overcrowded and most concentrated, and then have to go back to the people who misdiagnosed us and underdiagnosed us in the first place in order to get treated. And so all of that has created a perfect storm for sickness and death in our community, unfortunately.
So I want to bring you into this conversation, Ms. Rice. Obviously, the Urban League has long focused on these issues of inequities, disparities in our communities. I would assume that your work is just become even more important in the midst of this kind of pandemic. How important is it and significant is it that the Urban League work with AARP, other organizations, to really focus attention and resources on the people that are most affected?
Mm-hmm. It is vital that the New York Urban League continue to focus on these issues. Before COVID-19, we knew that a $400 emergency would be a devastating impact for African-American families. And through COVID-19, it's really underscored the fact that the safety net that New Yorkers just are in need of. The New York Urban League will be releasing our State of Black New York report next month. And in it, we've already found that over 52% of African-American families earn $50,000 or less. And so if you're in an environment, in a community where there's such an economic inequality, and then something like COVID-19 happens, it is even more imperative that we work in collaboration with other nonprofits and with our legislators in order to create real community change. The power of this collaboration that we have with AARP, the Asian American Federation, Hispanic Federation, and the New York Urban League working together is so important for us to address these issues.
And are there any policy changes that have policy changes that you really believe you need to get behind at this point in time to make sure that we come out on the other side of this not doomed to repeating the same mistakes over and over again, allowing the same people to, get less than they deserve, to continue to be underserved?
Well, I think income inequality is the biggest theme that runs through a lot of the policies that we're really working on and working towards. And I think that income inequality is particularly exacerbated for African American women because we're so many times the head of our households. And so the fact that we're still making so much less on a dollar than our male counterparts, than our white male counterparts, than our African American male counterparts has such a huge impact. And so income inequality is an area of policy focus that we'll continue to have at the New York Urban League.
And Senator Parker, how important is it for organizations like the Urban League, the AARP, the Hispanic Federation, the Asian American Federation? You know, they've got this this partnership that they've actually been in for a couple of years now, at least a couple of years. How important is that, you know, that coalition when it comes to actually getting legislation taken seriously and enacted? You know, you've got your part of the job to do, but how much of a difference does that make when it comes to, you know, how easy or difficult it is for you to actually help make this legislation law, to get these bills passed?
Yeah, I think that those kind of coalitions are actually critical in the context of the policymaking process. Politics is a numbers game, and it's one thing if African Americans are coming to the table. It's different if you have Latinos and African Americans. They have all of these, the Hispanic community, the African American community, the Asian American community, all coming together. I think certainly raises the point. And when you look at that from a population perspective, you're now talking about in the city of New York in particular, you're talking about, you know, well over 70% of the population of those three groups, right? And then women generally, right? And so it's really, really important. I think that's and having a specific theme and a specific set of ideas. And so we're going to attack this, you know, on 2 or 3 different levels, because the problem is we're dealing with, you know, competing priorities, right? And so, you know, we have to really kind of drill down and figure out what are the few things that we're going to work on. And it's not going to be one at a time, but we do have to have a defined set of legislative priorities. And I'm actually happy to say that I feel like I'm part of that coalition because I've worked with all of those groups very closely. And I'm looking forward to partnering with them as we go forward to address these issues, to do exactly what you said before, so make sure that this doesn't happen. And we're not just talking about in some distant future, we're talking about there may be a second wave in 6 or 7 months, and we really need to start talking about how do we undergird our community now to prepare our community for what may be coming very shortly.
Barbara Rice, New York Urban League, Senator Kevin Parker, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I suspect that this will not be the last time I have a conversation with either of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra Bookman, and Here and Now. We'll be right back.